All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. So, here I am in my backyard. Just so you know, you might hear some noise because I'm in the city, and there's a bunch of birds right here. Anyways, have you ever heard the saying, to obey is better than sacrifice, and rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft? Well, let me tell you, this is actually a biblical saying. This comes from the book of First Samuel, and those were words spoken by the prophet Samuel to Saul, the king, the then first king of Israel. And it comes at an interesting time in the history of Israel. It comes at a very interesting time in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and there is so many things there to learn from the life of Saul, the life of David. I mean, man alive, like books and books have been written about this subject. So, needless to say, yeah, there's a lot there. But here's the thing: at this time, God spoke through Samuel, the prophet, spoke directly to the king of Israel, Saul, and told him basically to go and to militarily defeat a nation that had committed evil against the children of Israel when they were wandering into the promised land, right? So he's given very specific instructions, okay? And those instructions may seem harsh, but they were very specific instructions. And literally, this was God's wrath on these people for, at a very low point in the nation of Israel's history, at their low point, where this other nation treated them harshly. So, anyways, he was told to go and execute this judgment on these people as the nation of Israel, to go and attack. And he did. The problem is, he did not follow the instructions that God gives you. Now, I wonder about this, right? If God speaks to you through a prophet, why wouldn't you listen? And I mean, this is something we've seen over and over in throughout the Old Testament. People not actually listening to the words of the prophets, people ignoring them, people rejecting them. You know, if you read through the book of Jeremiah, you see it all over, and it's crazy. Like, I think there are some extreme examples in the book of Jeremiah. Well, in this case, when Samuel shows up, the guy, Saul, the king, he has not done what he was told. And Samuel confronts Saul with those words: to obey is better than sacrifice. Because one of the things that Saul said was, hey, we brought all of these animals back so that we could sacrifice them to the Lord. And Samuel said, hey, no, to obey is better than sacrifice. Now, it's an interesting point, because I think some people feel that when they sacrifice something, okay, when they give something to God, somehow they're earning God's favor, okay? And if you study grace, you understand, first of all, how difficult that is, i.e., impossible to earn God's favor. God gives his favor. His grace gives favor to men, because that's really the only way that we have it, right? But some people think that way, and they live their life this way, where they're always trying to sacrifice in one way, give up something, or they're giving monetarily or something like that. So here, Samuel says, hey, obedience, that is better than sacrifice. To obey is better than sacrifice. And at first, Saul was like, hey, I did what God told me to do. He just didn't listen to the exact instructions, right? And so after that, Saul basically says, well, okay, so I've sinned and I've transgressed the commandment of God because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. And then he asks to be pardoned. And return with me that I may worship the Lord. Because Saul was putting up a front that he was walking in righteousness, okay, before the nation of Israel. And Samuel says, no, I'm not going to return with you because you rejected the word of the Lord. This is verse 26 of 1 Samuel 15. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord has rejected you from being king. Now that is something. And what we find out is basically Saul begs, and all that he's concerned about, really, is what people think of him. He's caught up in their opinion. He says this in verse 30, I have sinned, yet honor me now, please, before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me, that I may worship the Lord your God. Okay. Honestly, if it was me, and I was in that place, thankfully I'm not, right? But if I was in that place where the prophet came and said, God has torn the kingdom from you, you're not called to be king, he's going to choose somebody else. Wisdom says, okay, take it. I don't want to do this job if the Lord's not going to be with me. Especially something as important as being the king of Israel. Right? And yet what we see here is Saul has gotten addicted to this stature and this place of prominence. He cannot be honest about what's going on with the people around him because he never mentions this to anybody. It's very apparent. And over years, right? Years and years, he fights against God's will. He fights against the next king who he knows at some point is going to be David. He knows that. And he tries repeatedly to kill David. He also confronts his own son and says, hey, why are you friends with David? Don't you know he's going to be king and you're going to lose your inheritance and all of the stuff? He says all sorts of crazy stuff to literally tear Jonathan's heart from his friendship with David, who was anointed to be king and called by God to do it. All of that is to say, it shows you that this is what happens when you get caught up in serving sin rather than serving God. Okay? If you're serving sin, if your life is about sin and you're following after sin, you disregard God's will for you. You disregard his direction and his commandments for you. And you pursue after your own agenda. And that agenda is driven by something other than holiness and righteousness. And we see that so clearly in the life of Saul. Now, God used Saul, and God did things through the life of Saul, even after this. But Saul literally loses his mind. Over time, he goes crazy. And it gets crazier and crazier. His life gets crazier and crazier to where he tries multiple times to kill David. He stalks him. He chases him down when David's on the run in nowhere. And Saul chases him down with the army and all of this stuff. It gets nuts because literally Saul's addiction. And look, we have the event, the trigger point was one time they're coming back from a battle, Saul and David both, and these women come out and they sing, Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And basically that at that point, the jealousy and the anger and the murderous pursuit of David begins in Saul's life. And he never deals with that sin. He never takes that insecurity to God. And he literally, it brings him to the point of insanity. And when you have a king that is insane, that's trouble. Needless to say, if he had heeded the words here, if he had actually humbled himself, like a humble person would have gone to Samuel and said, okay, well, who is that person? Let's get him in here. If God's taken the kingdom from me, let's get the next guy in here. Or he goes to the elders of Israel and says before them, I just had an encounter with Samuel. I'm no longer the king. I stepped down because God has taken the kingdom from me. He didn't do that. He did not do that. He held on tooth and nail, and in the end, he dies in battle because he just will not listen. And it gets crazy. Anyways, this is all a warning. We look at it, it's a warning. We need to stay away from serving sin. When we serve sin, it is bad, okay? Sin is a cruel master, and it creates slavery, it creates addiction, it creates death is what the scripture says. It creates death. So take this to heart today. I hope you're having a great day. Remember, since it's Friday, the roundup is today on, you can watch it on YouTube or Rumble. Calvary Chapel Signal Hill on YouTube it's Calvary Chapel Signal Hill. On Rumble, look for James Cadiz, and they'll be there. And I hope you have a great weekend. May the Lord richly bless you. I'll see you on Monday.